Thank you, Carlene. Good morning, everyone. To be name dropped twice by Carlene in 2 consecutive mornings is profound in many ways. One, it tells me that someone actually listens, and I really appreciate that someone's listening. Maybe the first time anyone's listened to anything that I've said. But also, it tells me I got to be careful about what I say this year, because who knows what's going to happen next year at the conference. We're really happy to be a sponsor of the conference this year, particularly around the area of collaboration, because collaboration is more than just a concept for us at OrbitMI. It's actually baked into everything we do, from our brand to how we go to market, including with many people in the room here, and my friend Jonathan Arneault. We're working with FuelTrust on a number of things. So collaboration is kind of mother's milk for us, so to speak. On Monday, you may have seen a great piece of research dropped, sponsored by Thedius and Bureau Veritas, all about collaboration and digitalization. Could not have come up with a better timing for that. And it's called Common Sense. And we used it to help frame some of our discussion last week when we met. And I'm going to refer to it a couple of times here, but it's a wonderful piece of research. If you go, I think it should be on our LinkedIn profile, but certainly you can find it at Bureau Veritas. Download it and read it. It's really well worth the time. Before I got into the panel, what I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their companies, and then we'll get back into it and start the discussion. So why don't we start with you, Joe?
Sure. Thanks. I'm Joe Gross. I work for D'Amico Shipping. I'm the head of dry cargo operations here in the U.S. and manage D'Amico U.S. office. I also sit on Senator Murphy's Long Island Sound Advisory Council, and I'm a past president of the CMA. D'Amico is a family business based in Italy, with a fleet mostly tankers and bulkers trading globally. That's it.
Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Arneault. I'm the CEO of FuelTrust. FuelTrust is a fuel to emissions IT management company, meaning literally we look at the chemicals of the fuel and the process of the combustion of the fuel in the ships, and running the earth to emissions life cycle with that. And from a collaboration standpoint, I have 30 years in IT. I am the geek in the room, and I will try to not geek speak too much. So, thank you.
Well, that's why you're here.
That's why, yeah, fair enough.
Frank.
Thank you, David. Good morning. I'm Commander Frank Strom from the Coast Guard Office of Design Engineering Standards. Specifically, I'm the chief of our Systems Engineering Division, where we work on mechanical and electrical regulatory and policy development. My office also participates at the International Maritime Organization, where we're the technical lead on various IMO subcommittees and committees.
Great. And fresh from the woods in Woodstock, Fred?
Yeah, hi, I'm Fred Finger. I'm the Senior Vice President, Head of Operations for American Roll-On Roll-Off Carrier. We are the largest U.S. flag RoRo operator. All 9 of our ships operate inside of the Maritime Security Program, run by MARAD, and we are part of the Wallenius-Wilhelmsen Group, which runs about 130 RoRos worldwide.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to frame the discussion around the notion of collaboration, but slightly differently, in that when we have a conference that's entitled Collaboration, there's an implication that we need to learn something that we don't know, and that somehow collaboration is new to maritime. I know that's, Carly, not what you suggested, but let's just acknowledge that maritime is a very collaborative industry, maybe one of the most collaborative industries that we know of. And if you think about the number of people and parts and components and companies that are involved in building, say, something like a VLCC or a liquid natural gas carrier, there's a lot of people who have to work together and to orchestrate different components and workflows and communication. So maritime certainly knows how to collaborate. And maybe there's a muscle memory that needs to be applied to digitalization and technology that should serve it well. And I'm going to refer to this report. I'm actually going to read one of the excerpts here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Frank to comment on this and then to talk a little bit more about collaboration. Quoting from the report, shipping has a long heritage of collaboration under contracts. PI clubs, slot sharing agreements, and tanker pools are examples of shipping defining a mutual interest in developing a contractual framework to control collaboration fairly. In fact, around 95% of global container ship capacity on east-west trades is controlled by operators working through container shipping alliances. We have the Blue Sky Coalition. We've got a lot of different examples of how maritime collaborates. So, Fred, I wanted to get your comments on the notion of collaboration, how you see it impacting what you do.
Yeah, thank you, David. The Coast Guard has a long history of working with our maritime partners to advance safety and security. Specifically, we work with ship operators, classification societies, and vessel designers. Recently, with decarbonization efforts, my office has been charged with working on alternative fuel designs. A lot of these projects don't necessarily clearly fit into our existing regulations, so we have to work with those partners to come up with a safety regime that can essentially guarantee the same level of safety that our regulations would classically require for these vessels without having a lot of knowledge or experience with how these systems run. So we do have to leverage our industry partners. We have to utilize the data that they've been able to gather to build out what the regulatory structure is going to look like to advance these technologies as we continue to advance our decarbonization efforts.
Great. I'm going to continue to refer to or ask Joe and Fred, our ship owners, to talk a little bit more about things. Jonathan and I, we're technology guys, so we know all about collaboration. We can geek out, and we don't want to do that in front of everyone. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on this idea that maritime has got this kind of muscle memory about collaboration that can and should be applied to digitalization and other aspects of the business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree. It's been traditionally a very collaborative industry, in part because it's such a small industry, and you really can't do this work if you're just sort of an island unto yourself. So whether it's coordinating with the chartering group or the technical group, the insurance group, right, everybody's relying on everybody else to make sure that they have the information that they need, whether it's ETAs or weather or bunkers on board or cargo history. There's just a built-in reliance upon each other to make sure that the business can continue to move forward.
Great, thanks. I want to continue with discussing collaboration, and Jonathan, I'll throw this to you, and then Fred, and we can open this up to the panel. I'm not a fortune teller, and I'm certainly not a betting person, but I'm pretty sure of one thing. No one in this room, and no one at any conference in maritime around the world, or frankly anywhere in maritime, woke up this morning and said, I've got to get me some more collaboration today, right? It's not something you want, right? It's not an end in and of itself. Collaboration is a means to an end. It's a way of accomplishing certain goals. And Jonathan, you and I were talking about this. I wanted to get you to comment on it, and then I wanted to open up to you, Fred, as well, to talk about what some of those ends are that we're trying to reach, and particularly how collaboration and being a means to an end in digitalization. So,
yeah, okay. So I tend to look at collaboration, and I try even not to use that word sometimes because it raises people's barriers. It's this notion that I have to let people into my kitchen and into my house and do whatever they want. I look at collaboration as group problem solving. And that's really the end goal of any collaboration of any type is we have something we need to accomplish, we need to do it together, or I need people with expertise to come alongside and help me. So as long as we look at it that way, it really lowers the lack of openness or trust. I mean, my company's name is a play on words exactly around how do we help fuel trust in this collaborative problem we're trying to solve. The struggle of digitization in this industry is that we we are used to collaborating via email or documentation, and human beings touch it. The value of digitization is that it automates the checks, the proper view of what information is going back and forth. It makes demands of us that we don't have some of that muscle memory from a functional standpoint, but we definitely do in knowing many people have to play a part in the life cycle of that, whatever particular problem or creation that we're trying to do. The problem of how do I make sure I can share data instead of just emailing ugly bits of it, that's been solved by hundreds of different industries around the world. We don't have to reinvent it. We simply have to take the capabilities that are known elsewhere and then apply them specifically to this industry. The good is they made all those investments, right? We get to leapfrog 30 to 40 years of technological innovation investments and just borrow them with the nuances of the shipping industry today. So the good is collaboration will not be as costly here as, say, it was in banking 30 years ago, or in virtual networks, or overcoming fax machines and actually doing it via digitized processes.
Thank you, John. The idea of collaboration as group problem solving is an interesting topic to think about. And you mentioned something that's almost an oxymoron, which is we're comfortable with collaboration, we understand it, but there's something about the fact that when it's person to person, we can understand what that means. But when you take the human element out of it and it's machines talking to machines and systems talking to systems, there's something a little bit mysterious about that, which that's maybe an area where we can learn a little bit more. What I wanted to ask Fred is talk about, if collaboration is a means to an end, or it's a group way of group problem solving, what are some of the issues we talked about last week where you are, in particular with your business, where you really need collaboration to address certain business challenges?
Yeah, so I think for us, there are three areas that we really try to focus on in collaboration, and where we're trying to use digitalization and technology to move forward. And that first one, and the one that's paramount, is safety. The second one is quality of life for the mariners on board the ships. And then third, certainly also equally important in a lot of ways, is creating efficiency. And I think the comment that Jonathan made, that you have all of these other industries that have solved a lot of the problems, and what we're doing now, or what we're trying to do, is find those people who have the entrepreneurs that have been in other parts of the industries and bring them over to the maritime side. And we've got probably right now, I don't know, maybe 25 projects that we're running with really entrepreneurs. They're all small businesses, and we're trying to make sure it fits, explain our business to them, which is difficult because it is rather unique. And then ultimately the goal is to form a trusted relationship with these guys, and then we go forward, right? Perfect example with the trusted partnership piece, I think, is, so we had a pretty serious RoRo fire on one of our vessels back in 2015. Luckily, no one was hurt, but we did end up losing a ship. Basically, the ship was a constructive total loss. And we had to do a lot of collaboration with P&I, with the hull insurers, with the Coast Guard. I spent a huge amount of time in Washington speaking with folks up there in the Marine Safety Center and explaining what we were trying to do, explaining what we thought the problem was, what caused it. And then we asked them for help. We said, well, you've got a lot more visibility to things that maybe I can't see. Can you give us some feedback? This is a direction we want to go in. Do you think we're going in the right direction? And it was incredibly useful. And, for me, it's being able to reach out is critically important. It's the only way we're going to move forward.
So how, from 2015 to 2023, how did you employ technology and digitalization to maybe address some of the issues that you saw?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of when we first did it was really changing the way we did business, changing how we responded to a fire, increasing the number of safety rounds we did, doing a different type of inspection on the vehicles before they came on board. But right now, as technology has moved forward, we've been able to really, I think, make a huge step, and that is we've essentially digitized the entire ship. So we put a mesh Wi-Fi system that covers the entire ship, all the cargo holds, on deck, everything. So now what we can do is go out and get all these things that are available in the Internet of Things and start attaching that to the ship. So we are looking at remote devices that we can look at that are very sensitive to temperature rise. So if there's an issue with a car, traditionally now we have all of our safety systems are in the overhead, and the fire has to be burning pretty good before, you know, something that could be 8 foot above where the fire is gets hot enough to put an alarm on. So what we're doing is we're trying to figure out a way to get it much closer so we'll be able to identify that risk before it's a fire. Maybe it's just, you know, a wire that's burning before you have an open conflagration. We can respond, put a fire blanket over it, isolate it, and we're done. So it's being able to, and we're doing the same thing with, we have a system called Pythia, which is artificial intelligence. It's by a company called Deep Sea, and we're doing that through Linus Wilhelmsen. But what it does is every day it looks at the course the ship is on, it looks at all the weather information that's available, and what your ETA is, and it will give the captain recommendations on how to optimize fuel consumption and get to port and maintain the schedule. It doesn't tell the captain what to do, but it gives him advice, because I think that's the other critical thing is we still have to remember the captain is paramount, it's his decision, we have to let him do his job, so all we can do is give him tools to do his job better.
It occurs to me as we're talking about collaboration and digitalization that no one here woke up this morning and said, I got to get me some digitalization either, right? Digitalization is also a means to an end. And with the topics around decarbonization and performance management, optimization of just-in-time inventories, it seems like these are two concepts that are designed, again, to help achieve certain means to an end. And Joe, I wanted to ask you and then open up to the panel, how do you see digitalization and the collaboration involved with it addressing things like decarbonization or just-in-time inventories, because I'm a geek, but just-in-time port calls?
Sure. Listen, there's any number of ways it touches that. I mean, as an example, we talked about this the other day. You know, there are certain places where you can take different actions to reduce carbon emissions. I mean, we've had instances where we might have a ship coming open in Houston that's going to load in West Coast Florida, and working with the DPA and weather routing and the captain and chartering if we have some time up our sleeve. You know, there have been a few cases where I've been able to let a ship almost drift from Houston to Tampa, for example, which is a huge bunker savings, right? You know, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into making that sort of a decision. So, you know, when you take that step back, there are so many opportunities that you can find. But obviously we're working with chartering, we're working with, you know, all the groups internally as well as, you know, external partners, whether it's charters or owners or weather routing, to provide the sort of data that we need to make those decisions. I mean, although there's one point that I was thinking about the other day I think is worth making, which is also, you know, it's easy for us as a ship owner to find ways to get the data we need in a sort of less obtrusive way to the master of the ship, right? The captain, him or her, has a stack of reports that have to get sent every day. And we as a ship owner, we might be able to minimize that, right? Through sensors, through systems that we put on board that might be able to manage that autonomously. But when you get 1 or 2 or 3 charters sort of in the chain, they are all using different systems. It's not their ship. They're all need other sets of information sent in different ways, right? So not that 2 or 3 or 5 additional reports is a huge imposition on the ship's captain, but when you think about all the other things that he or she will have to do over the course of a day, the course of a voyage, you know, you get that sort of cumulative effect of adding more work to the people on board the ship. And you know, I think as we're in that gap between, you know, not really having digitalized things to a large degree, and we move more towards digitalization where eventually there will be some standardization, eventually there will be more sensors on board the ship. At the moment, there are a lot of instances where we're actually sort of adding to the work of the folks on board the ship, which is really sort of the core of where a lot of this information is going to come from.
If you're looking for a solution for reporting and minimizing the burden of reporting on board, I have a company I might want to introduce you to.
No, absolutely. And for our ships, where we control it, that's fine. But when we have 2 or 3 charters who are all using different systems with different data formats and different requirements, that's all somebody sitting there typing things in and emailing it or sending it or doing whatever they're obligated to do as part of the charter party, right?
Yeah, if I can jump in there for a moment. So, you know, we receive at least 60 different formats from 20 different chartering or management companies. Notice multiple formats per management company and whatnot. And then part of that digitization process, as you're alluding to, isn't really digitization, it's data entry. And so in some cases, we're taking very rudimentary information, Excel spreadsheets, chit sheets literally coming in various formats, noon reports, operational reports, sensor data from different SCADA systems, IoT devices. That's a lot to deal with for folks that are not used to data collaboration, because collaboration is not just people and sharing the data, it's making sense of that. Again, I will say that it's not unable to be overcome, but I would say every company doesn't have to overcome it themselves. If there becomes methodologies or plucky little startups that they focus on maritime data collaboration, and there you do need some specialization. There has to be meaning to the data, and understanding of that data, and a company that knows how to go one between the other. There is a great opportunity there for owners, operators, different suppliers to the industry to really take advantage and rapidly accelerate on the data side of the collaboration and really cut costs there. We're on the cusp, right? I expect the next year and a half some companies to go away and really the collaborative data interfaces between those to really come out. And one player will not win everything. So if anybody's thinking they're going to corner the market, monopolize it, that doesn't happen in any other industry, it's not going to happen here. So.
Correct. Frank, you're nodding your head up and down vigorously. I wanted to get you to comment on this.
No, a lot of great points by all the panelists recently. Shameless plug, my office recently released Navigation and Vessel Investigation Circular 123, which was for the voluntary use of MARPOL electronic record books. We think this could be a big help in the digitization effort because, well, it's maybe less burdensome now for the ship crew to not have to fill out the paper logbook and have a digital format that they can log all of their records for all the MARPOL systems. You can now get real-time data back at the management level to help drive overall efficiency. So you can see real-time fuel burns, things like that. So as more data is collected there, it can overall help you bring down some of your environmental footprints. I'll also speak briefly maybe on the safety aspect too. As more of these systems become more automated and more data is collected, I think we're hopeful that you could start to see improved safety records on a lot of things. A lot of times now, especially on older ships, you rely on kind of manufacturer information as to performance or how long something's going to work. So something like your fuel filter might have 10,000 hour performance level. As you put more sensors on ships and these sensors gather more data, you get real-time performance for how that ship's operating, and it could potentially let you know that something like a fuel filter is going to fail before you typically expect it to fail, which will help drive down safety and overall improve shipping.
This is an interesting topic that you bring up because we'll talk a little bit more about culture as it relates to collaboration and digitalization momentarily, but the idea of automation here is really interesting, and I want to get you guys to comment on this. We we can automate a lot of things, but the question is, should we? We have a client on our platform that has decided there are certain checks and balances they want to insert into the data flow from the vessels onto onshore, and they want to make sure there's a human being who approves and says, yes, this is the bunker consumption day over day, right? So that's the kind of thing. And so that is their culture. And they say, we need to put someone in place because we don't want that automated. We have other customers who operate larger pools who maybe don't own the vessels, they TC in a lot, where they say, just automate all of that stuff, right? And we'll fix it afterwards if and our system can flag errors. But different companies have different philosophies around the automation, and underneath automation is this idea of data standards and things like that. But Fred, what are your thoughts on that in terms of like automating compared to the need to have someone actually say, I am allowing this to move through, or I'm certifying this?
Yeah, so we are moving very quickly to automation. We have relatively small crews. Administrative functions, we're trying to automate to the greatest extent possible. We've really invested a lot of money in putting sensors on board. We have mass flow meters for fuel consumption. And we're using the Strom Geo reporting system. We're using VDC right now. We're switching over to the SINSIGHT. And the way it works really is the more you do it, the better it gets. So in the beginning, we were making a lot of corrections. I had a guy that was pretty much doing it full time. But as we started seeing the types of errors that were there, they would make adjustments to the software so that the software would catch the error itself. And if it saw something that was obviously wrong, it would let us know right away. And it has taken a huge burden off the ship. So the noon reports are automated, the arrival reports are automated, departure reports are automated, and the captain doesn't have to worry about sitting down after being in port for 12 hours, now spending another hour and a half pushing paper around to make sure everybody's happy in the morning. So for us, it's critical that this automation continues to grow, and there are reasons to have a crew on board a ship. Filling out paper isn't one of them.
Well said. That's a quote. Carlene, you'll keep me honest on time here. We've got some more things we want to go through. I want to refer back to the Thaddeus report. The second half of it talks about the challenges to collaboration. And what I'd like to do is read an excerpt from the report and then get the panel to comment on it. This one I'm going to throw over to you, Jonathan. The challenge is around data silos. Controlling access to data is a vital part of keeping data secure and protecting confidential and sensitive information. But silos can also restrict data access needlessly or to the detriment of others with a legitimate interest or use case. To move ahead with the technological evolution of the shipping industry at scale, liberating data and improving its liquidity is of vital importance. Moving data across environments and generating multiple copies of the same data has cost implications in time, money, and resources, not to mention the consequences of making the data more prone to error as a result of its syndication. So, Jonathan, talk to us a little bit about data silos and collaboration.
So that what they alluded to there, particularly the data duplication and needing to move data from one place to another or make it accessible one place to another. You've just described banking, telecom, e-commerce. All right, so these are not just our issues, and opening the window to your data source. Never do that, right? Don't just say, all right, you go figure it out, and come. I've got all this stuff stored away. Part of the issue of overcoming data silos, not just between multiple parties or collaborators, but even inside a company, it's part of a cultural problem. Right? I own my system. I'm the specialist here. I'm going to build a set of data repository. Sorry, this geek speak. I'm going to have a place to stick my data, database, et cetera, and then I'm going to have applications that access that. You have yours, and then inside we may share back and forth by duplicating data. That is a recipe for duplicative and multiplicative costs inside a company and across companies. So platforms help, right? Both inside and collaboration platforms. The good is, you know, as this industry is digitizing, we are not digitized. We are not, don't kid yourself. But we are rapidly digitizing. The opportunity to build on cloud-based platforms, have collaborative platforms that we're using. Data standardization will help, although in the modern world, data definition is the most important. We don't all have to use the same set of data, same systems and whatnot. As long as data is defined in my system that I'm using or my platform that I'm using, it's easy for that same data to be redefined, have the this means that type definition in another platform. That will break down those data silos. And the ability to use existing technologies that are fairly modern overcome a lot of these issues around data privacy, data access, permissioned privacy, and ability to have multi-party access to information as it changes. What I mean by that is a multi-step transaction like a port of call. I've got multiple people that have to move through a process. They have to have different access to the information at different times. Technology can help solve that, and you don't have to build it yourself, right? There are, again, company specialists that do differing components of those, and then, or there are, as Fred has mentioned, there are plucky startups or people that want to have a plucky startup that you can, you know, put a little money into, and they'll build a solution not only for you, but then can scale to your near peers and cooperation competitors. So, my view on it.
That was very
Did I
good.
answer the
Yeah,
question?
there's a little bit of data stuff in there, but you know.
Yeah, I haven't.
You didn't mention Hadoop clusters, which if you had
we can geek speak later if you're interested.
Joe, I wanted to get you to comment on this idea of data silos and how you see it, whether it's at your company or just in general, how you're identifying them or breaking them down, or how do you look at that in terms of making your business run?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's actually something that we work very hard on, right? Because we do have a lot of, at the moment, disparate systems, right? We have systems that track vessel movements and commodities, right? That use AI to determine what's moving where and the quantities and who, right? That's out there. We have systems that look at all our emails and emails from other companies that they are providing email systems for, and pull all the vessel positions out, pull all the cargoes out, and use that to drive their data analytics on a sort of larger market scale. We have the voyage management systems, right? So then the question becomes, how do we integrate all that, right? If part of the point is to, if you're looking really at a commercial point of view rather than the operational safety point of view, which obviously is a very different issue, how can we take all that information and use it to make our business more efficient rather than a hindrance when you've got, you know, a dashboard full of all different information. So, you know, that's a big driver for us right now as we look at new systems, it becomes increasingly critical that they're able to integrate with one another.
Can I interject one thing?
Yeah, please.
So just a little life experience. When I was an executive at IBM about 10 years ago, we were on a journey. We took the existing systems that had been built up over many years, bought, installed things that we had invested in that were best of breed at the time. We really, really needed them. We discovered that we had somewhere in the range of 12,000 different systems and applications. Now, granted, 400,000 person company serving millions of clients. We took a 5-year journey to dedupe and get rid of things that were just 90% overlap. They might have that 10% specialization, but is it really worth it? And at the end of that journey, we were able to get down to 1,800 applications. So still an extremely large set, but comparatively, the savings was billions of dollars annually. you should expect that. In technology emergence, you're going to, at the beginning, have lots of overlap and duplicative costs, things that you really, really need. But then as things converge in an industry, as more capabilities go out, you should make it part of your annual planning process to look at when do we begin our dedupe or our simplification of what we've got. It'll reduce your overall spend. The migration will be a little bit costly, but you've got to factor that out over a period of 3 to 5 years on the cost savings you're going to have. What you're experiencing is exactly what companies do as they mature, and they really
Right,
become best of breed.
which is
Yeah.
right, and that's a piece of it. But you know, I mean, to me, from where I sit, the larger issue is how to integrate it and manage it so that I'm not looking at
Right.
1,200 different
Yeah,
applications.
yeah. Nobody
right? I
wants
wanna look
another
at one
screen to look
place.
at. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you want it fed into as few systems as possible, right?
Yeah.
So that you can manage and really utilize the efficiency.
You can ask, that's a good point. Sorry, I'm going to hawk my wares. So nobody wants another pane of glass. You can ask your vendors if they plug into a management console, or will they? Will they build and plug in to a management console so that you're not having to dedupe data or flip to another screen? You know, you want to have a management dashboard or console. You don't want 30 or 40. So the industry is at a place where those companies can or should be willing to make those investments because it's very nascent. So just offer that.
Thanks. And if anyone's looking for a system that integrates multiple systems, I know a company. Let me move on to another, seriously, Joe, we should talk. Another obstacle to collaboration that was identified in the Thedius report is cultural and behavior resistance. And we talked about this a little bit, but Frank, I wanted to get you to think about this, particularly, you know, the Coast Guard, the military, there's different kind of culture there. And so I wanted to get you to comment on this. In the report, they talk about a PwC output that describes 3 ways to drive successful cultural change. You can read this stuff, I'm not going to read that. But the conclusion here is, based on our experience, PwC, culture is a key means, again, means to an end, culture is not an end, a means of creating sustainable transformation along with foundational elements like broad-based communication, employee engagement, and leadership alignment. The challenge is linking culture work to practical, business-relevant changes that directly affect the behaviors of frontline employees. So I'm sure you all have things to say about this, but I wanted to get you to comment on this first, Frank.
No, thank you, David. I guess just to tie maybe back into the previous topic too, inside the Coast Guard, we usually find the maritime industry is very willing to share data with us, and we find it very helpful. It helps us advance our regulatory development, but often that's heavily caveated with this is proprietary in nature, which is understandable because specifically in our office, a lot of what we work on is novel technology. So that data, you know, has a business interest for who's sharing it with us, and they like to keep it contained to drive their business forward. I think though, to maybe Jonathan's point, as some of this stuff gets more mature, the sharing of that data is incredibly useful because that overall is going to start, you know, overall improving the maritime safety that's out there. And then especially as we continue to advance these decarbonization efforts, the sharing of all that data that's collected amongst all of the industry partners, you know, could better enhance that and start bringing down everybody's carbon footprint.
Brent, how does your company's culture impact collaboration?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, if you look at it, so I was, just we were going through this, I was thinking back. So when I got to ARC about 15 years ago, and they really weren't using weather routing a whole lot, right? And I had captains back then when we gave them weather routing guidance who basically said, I know better than the weatherman. I don't need anybody telling me how to do this. I've been doing it for X number of years. And so we let them do whatever they want. And we found out, of course, they weren't as good as they thought they were, and the weather routing almost always beat them. But that has changed. So a lot of those older captains are no longer in the industry. And the guys we have out there now really are embracing the technology. They're looking for better new solutions. They're engaged in setting the systems up because a lot of times for a lot of this technology, it's brought on as plug and play, and they'll have the ship They'll send it to the ship and say, okay, can you guys hook it in? And I couldn't do it, but the guys we have on board are able to do that. So, and I don't think it's specific to ARC. I think in general, there is a new breed on board the ships that really are embracing the technology. They're used to it at home. They're used to doing all these things, and they want to see it on board the ships as well. So I think that cultural change is really helpful in moving towards this, concept of digitalizing as much as we can to optimize, like I said, safety, quality of life, and operations.
I want to highlight something here that's implicit in what you said and see if we can talk a little bit more about it. Again, culture is another term that means a lot to different people, right? And it can be used in a number of different ways, but at the heart of it, it's about people, right? It's about one or two people, any two people who are working together, there's a culture there. So what you're talking about is the impact of generational change, not just on culture, but also how it impacts collaboration and digitalization. I'm wondering if any of you see that as well in terms of employees that are coming in, turnover. How has that impacted the ability to drive these kinds of results?
Well, I think the seafarers that we have now, I mean, certainly different than when I was sailing 30 years ago. The business has shifted and the human resources have shifted. And, certainly what you have now is a very well-educated, technically literate core of people on board the ships, right? But we are asking them to manage all sorts of very complicated systems, right? Navigational, ballast water, exhaust gas cleaning, any number, and we're asking them to manage more and more of it, which obviously therefore relies on more technology in order to manage all those disparate systems. So, I think they're well educated, they're interested, and I think the average age is probably much younger than I am now out on the ships, and they grew up on smartphones, right? So they're very comfortable with the technology as well. So from that point of view, the crews we have on board now, by and large, I think are very comfortable with the technology piece of it.
Thank you, Joe. I've gotten the high sign from Carlene that we should move into Q&A. But before I did, I wanted to read from the conclusion of the Thedius report. I thought that was really, really interesting. And then we'll take questions. Maybe this will spark some questions. Breaking down barriers to data sharing and collaboration isn't easy. There are many challenges to address from practical, political, legal, and technological standpoints. Competition laws and antitrust concerns are likely to continue to test the boundaries between competition, collaboration, and consent through the transition. Cultural and behavioral legacy will also continue to apply a drag factor. Interesting. Ultimately, all change comes at a cost, monetarily, culturally, and psychologically. Really great report. I recommend you guys all take a look at it. Do we have any questions? Just say who you are, and then if there's anyone in particular you want to respond to, please do.
Hi. Oh, Carlene, sorry, I beat you.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Roberto Yames. I'm with the Smart Development Institute. Coincidentally, I'm going to be, moderating the human capital on the human element side a little later. And my question has something to do with the last question about cultural aspect, the human capital. I am also a digital guy. I've been in the business for over 30 years. But one thing I know about digitalization, you talk about efficiencies. So as ships adopt new technologies, it may result in the displacement of certain mariners or global maritime professional. What's your thought in a transformational program to repurpose displaced mariners?
that's for one of you guys to talk about. Fred, Jim,
I'll go first.
Frank, go ahead.
I think we're hopeful that the increased use of digitalization and information collection doesn't reduce the mariner, it just makes the mariner's job easier on board. So as you implement more of these autonomous systems, you'll still have the human element there to monitor their performance, but the system will, in of itself, will take on a lot more of the functions that the mariner would have to do. So I think at least in the short term, and maybe a little bit further projecting out, it won't be necessarily a reduction of mariner, it would just be increased automations on board the vessel to make the mariner's life a little bit easier.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're at a point now where unless you're going to have an autonomous ship, you're about as low from a crew perspective as you can have to safely operate. The challenge we have right now is there's just an increasing regulatory and administrative workload being placed on the ships. And when I sailed, we didn't have any of that. The captain would get one email a day or one telex a day, and he would answer that, and that's all we had, and then we ran the ship. Today, they're getting hundreds of emails from huge numbers of people. It takes a lot of time. It's distracting from what their primary role is, and what we're trying to do is eliminate that white noise so that they can do what they're trained to do. But I don't envision it as reducing the size of the crew. We still need lookouts because I've got a system called Orca on board, which basically gives me a digital picture for the ship of what's actually on the radar, and they can basically look at it. But if that breaks, they still have to know how to go out, look at a contact, understand what that contact is doing. So I don't see that going away. I think it just makes their life, as somebody said, more livable. I mean, it's a tough job. I think it's tougher now because we no longer have time in port. So there's got to be a reason for them to go out there, and it's to do their job and not be buried in paperwork. I mean, so I think that's the goal, I think, across where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and you know, a seafarer, or the industry in general, anyone in maritime, it is such a specialized knowledge set that I cannot see the industry shrinking the number of personnel from where it's at. Shipping is expanding while the personnel is shrinking. And so repurposing an individual, I'm not so worried about that. It's the keeping the skills current. That's really, I think, where the big effort will end up needing to be. The core knowledge, the experiential knowledge that person has, can be plugged in almost anywhere within the industry, as long as they are willing to upskill into the newer technologies that are being applied.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, even if we can take some of the pressure off in terms of reporting and other things that can be digitized, there's always a bulkhead to chip, right? There's always a shiv that needs greasing, right? I mean, you know, there's always work to do on board a ship. So.
We had one more question, I believe.
Hello, my name is Paul Camp. I'm from the UK. I'm brand new to the shipping industry. Started this year, having been in other disruptive industries, including the internet, solar, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and utility scale battery energy storage. So I'm curious to understand the difference between legacy metal, so that's pre-existing vessels, and what you're seeing the digitalization is occurring in that, relative to what you might be seeing in prospective new builds, and how you are differentiating or deciding when to make the change with respect to your comments around cost, etc., which I'm hopefully going to present on tomorrow, with respect to financing and lowering CapEx and OpEx, etc. But where are you seeing the distinctions in the digitalization with respect to legacy vessels, so the technology goes into legacy vessels, versus the technology that is already incumbent or coming into the new build vessels, and how are you making those decisions as, hey, we need to switch, or we've seen that in a new vessel, maybe we could put that in our old vessel. What are those kind of conversations happening in your industry across your sectors?
Well, so let me try and take that. So I think that the real difference is On a new ship, you're going to design the technology into it. On an existing ship, you're going to have to retrofit that technology onto it. Any ship that's been built in the last 20 years will have most of the sensors that we're looking for already on, integrated into the vessel. So it really, from our perspective, has been to be able to access that and get it off the ship so that we can analyze it and then give them meaningful information back to safely operate. But I don't think it's as difficult as it sounds. I think, like I said, most of that is already built into even older tonnage. If you get anything that's built really post 2000, you're going to see most of those sensors on the engines and equipment is already there. It's just a matter of going in and connecting it up.
All right. I thought we were going to be done, but obviously
No,
Carlene has a question.
we wanted to leave lots of time for Q&A for this. Last weekend, and I was busy last weekend, I spent about 20 minutes on the phone with a girlfriend who works for a media sales organization, and she spent 20 minutes complaining about yet another platform that her company wanted her to start working on. And really, it was a 20-minute conversation, and we were talking about her sales commission. We're talking about lives, we're talking about the environment, we're talking about high capital assets here. And I can't help but remember the challenges our industry had with ECDIS, harmonizing ECDIS. One of the attributes to the Casco-Busan accident in San Francisco was that it was a different ECDIS platform, that system that they weren't used to looking at. How can we offer all of these new digital tools with safety in mind, with harmonizing information so a mariner can go from one vessel to the next and know that, and recognize the technologies? How can we make it, and another question is, we've got whole generations of wannabe astronauts because it was so cool that Neil Armstrong went to the moon. Digital tools can be our recruitment tool for this generation. How can we really optimize the tools that you're bringing to market so that we're safe, so that we're attractive as an industry, and to reduce the burden on mariners today, and office and commercial?
Well, let me take that for a moment, Carlene, and then I'll open it up to colleagues on the panel. There's two issues there. One is from an industry marketing perspective. How do we make the industry more attractive? That's a larger issue. But I do think portraying shipping as a modern industry or modernizing industry that's got the ability for people to take some of the skills and from other industries that, I can actually apply that to shipping, right? I was in consumer marketing, I work for IBM, I work for a banking industry, and now I see that there's opportunities for me to take those skills to another industry as exciting as shipping is part of it. I don't have the answer, okay? But the other thing from the other perspective is when we talk to our customers, and Jonathan, you may appreciate this. Gosh, I hope you do. We try not to talk about technology. No one wants to talk about technology. We see people glazed over, we learned this a long time ago. We want to talk about their business challenges. We want to talk about the things that they're trying to solve and understand those first, and then we have to qualify who we talk to, but we hope that we can find a solution to those things. And once you start to talk about some of the very real issues that Joe and Frank and Fred were talking about, then you can have conversations and say, we can help you with that, or we can't help you with that. But no one wants to talk about, we try to get very quickly past the discussion of our technologies and what it can do and get down to what people really want to achieve with their business.
Yeah, so part of it is it's a human problem, and it's a real problem, is it's very difficult to take an individual who's lived with 30 years of dealing with a giant operating factory that floats where people can die if you get something wrong, right? And saying, I can automate that and fix it all for you, right? If you've not been to sea, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? The complexity of the systems of a vessel are far beyond anything I've seen other than a nuclear power plant, right? That's just a reality. However, that does not mean it's an insurmountable problem. I think we as technologists have to be very careful to be not glib as we talk about how we will solve some of these problems. And then we tone down, we come at it with a very humble approach and really talk about it from a naval architect level as opposed to an IT systems level. They match very closely, but they're two entirely different languages trying to describe a systems-based approach. And so I think that's one of the big challenges that we face, in that we really are coming up with really good solutions. But if I talk about blockchain and AI and neural networks and computer vision, you know, the person who's trying to deal with their fuel consumption management platform, or sorry, I'm very jet lagged. I just came in from Manila last night. You know, their drift on that vessel. What do I know about drift unless I really go study it, right? It's not just a systemic physics problem. So I think that is one of the key challenges that do need to be overcome, in that those of us who come from a very specific technological background eat some humble pie and really come and understand what it is to be a vessel master, a chief engineer, a supplier management. I mean, nobody in IT knows that you have to put nitrogen into a bunker tank so the thing doesn't explode, right? We just don't get that idea. Those things you have to build up and make part of that conversation. And so I am hopeful. I am seeing a lot of progression there. But at a fundamental level, we do have some language that has to be overcome, and it's on us. And then secondly is really think globally about the system of a vessel and or a fleet, a system of systems, and then talk about it in the language of the mariner or the ship owner, rather than the IT specialist who loves to come out with new technology.
Can I jump in? Because you, whether by design or accident, Carleen, you asked my trigger question, which is, how do we get people excited about the industry? And what can we use to do that? And, you know, if you go on the street and ask people what they know about ships, they'll talk about the Exxon Valdez, the Brer, the Casco Busan. This is what people know about our industry. They have no understanding that they can buy a pair of sneakers at Walmart for $20 because there are 22 men and women on board a 120,000-ton container ship bringing those goods over safely through pirate-infested waters, through storms, right? And that, to me, that's kind of unforgivable for a maritime nation as we are. Number one. Number two, as an industry, and I think partly because we are a very small industry and we are a global industry, we have the ability to do things that most industries, I believe, can't. So when we make a decision as an industry to remove copper from bottom paints, to reduce sulfur emissions, we may argue about the timing, we may argue about the best way to do it, we may argue about who has to pay for it, but in the end, we're going to get it done as an industry. And, you know, to me, we've done remarkable things, right? I mean, any of you who were at the CMA Gala dinner in 2019 probably heard me yelling from the dais, reminding people that from 2359, December 31st of 2019 to 0001, January 1st of 2020, as an industry, we reduced sulfur emissions 7-fold. Find me another industry that's been able to do that. As an industry, we move 90% of everything, finished and unfinished, and we emit less than 3% of the global greenhouse gases emitted on the planet. Those are remarkable things that we've managed to do. And I think those are things, there's a young cadet at the table here, sorry to point you out. These are the things that resonate with her generation. And why, when you're watching news programs on Sunday morning, you see television commercials for ADM, not to pick on you, Jan Willem, it's well positioned. Why are we as an industry not presenting ourselves in the same manner, in the same media that any other sort of trading industry is? You know, we move everything, we move it safely, we demand a huge amount from our mariners, who by and large nobody thinks about. And we should be, you know, screaming that from the mountaintops. That's, to me, how we present our industry and get new people and new ideas and new opportunities in.
All right.
Well, that's a great way to end. Thank you very much. Have a great day.